This episode contains sensitive topics, including sexual assault, human trafficking of minors, drug use, and mental health struggles that could be triggering for some listeners. Due to these topics, this episode may not be appropriate for all ages. Listener discretion is advised. If you are experiencing emotional distress, please reach out to a mental health professional. Hey y'all! Welcome back to Shootin' the Breeze for the second installment of my conversation with Alicia Tappan, human trafficking survivor and founder of Survivor-Led Solutions. In today's episode, we'll uncover common misconceptions about human trafficking. For instance, when I say human trafficking, what picture automatically comes to your mind? For me, for many years, when I heard these words, I pictured international players, usually in third world countries. I rarely pictured Americans being trafficked, unless, of course, they were on vacation in Paris and their dad, Liam Neeson, had to rescue them. I can also tell you, I always pictured women or girls, and they were being trafficked for sex only. But hardly any of these situations are in the majority, and they also place human trafficking far away in our mind's eye, something that would take a hero to prevent or stop. Thankfully, today I am joined by a real-life hero and survivor who will help set the record straight, especially about the trafficking that happens right here in America, as well as discussing the role mental health plays in a survivor's journey to recovery. Alicia will also share practical advice for parents, educators, and community influencers on how to spot red flags and take action to prevent trafficking. This conversation is both enlightening and empowering. So grab that sweet tea or a beverage of your choice and join us. All right, I am back for a second week with Alicia Tappan. Alicia shared with us her personal story of surviving human trafficking and going on to help others, specifically in her nonprofit called Survivor-Led Solutions, which we will be talking about next week. If you didn't listen to that episode, I highly encourage you to go back and listen to last week's episode. It is a very powerful story. And it also brought to light some things when I was talking to her earlier this month that are very common misconceptions about human trafficking. So I want to throw it to Alicia now, the professional, and ask her, what are some of the most common misconceptions about human trafficking, especially here in America, that you think people really need to understand?
And I'm so grateful to be able to continue this segment. So thank you, Michaela, for bringing me back. I am just, I guess, overwhelmed by the context of what we put human trafficking into. We spend so much time teaching people that it's a huge problem. It's like the second leading criminal industry in the world. There's all these missing children, but yet we still don't even know how to define it. So I do that. I ask when I train, and I train law enforcement, mental health providers. It doesn't matter what group you are, I will come train. And I will tell you from the national level with like the human trafficking awareness programs that are out there, the Homeland Security Conference, the Just Conference, all these different conferences that have it. And when you get a room full of law enforcement or social workers, they still struggle to even define that. I think this is an important conversation that we need to have, not just for the lay person, but for the professional that is doing the work. We tend to see the criminal instead of a victim in a criminal situation. So, misconceptions. Number one, I think it's really important to note that it does not matter who you are. Traffickers are looking for your vulnerabilities. And I know we hinted that in the first session together, but I think we need to bring it home. The average age is a 12 to 14-year-old girl. However, there is a huge rise in male subjects. With this whole movement on my body, my choice, with the idea and concept that there's minor attracted persons, with the idea that this is a sexual orientation and versus a psychological problem, it's really important. There's many different types of pedophilia, prepubescent, postpubescent. There's many different levels of prostitution from a minor to a felony. And I think people need to understand that it's not about the person itself, it's about the criminal act. Your vulnerabilities bring you to this place, right? Your age, what you look like, where you live, your socioeconomic status, your religion, just being born into people who are unhealed, poverty that is generational. All of those can lead to trafficking, but so can, just like myself, a white girl in a middle class family in a small town where we all said this would never happen. You can be vulnerable. What I think people really need to understand is that there is a conversation happening right now about legal sex work. And those that are pro sex work, meaning they work in the strip clubs or in private parties, the escort system, all of this, these people who work in this industry do not think that they can be victimized. It's my body, my choice. What we're not getting is the full picture. I want to know, you know, and I would love to hear a poll. How many people wanted to become a sex worker when they grew up? Poll those 5-year-olds. No one says that. You are taught that. And so we do that by our media, our music, right? The places we build and the things that we dream of are all created by our environmental structures. Now, there is some nature in this nature versus nurture conversation where you're predisposed. Your culture defines it. Your parents defined it. If your parents were into sex work, you're going to be raised up into it, right? And in a whole culture where she looks grown, she's fast because she's a 12-year-old who, hit puberty and it came full throttle. And now she's got, breasts and a butt to complement her figure. Now all of a sudden it's her fault. And you know what I mean? It's just so interesting. So we have to break the misconceived notion that this trafficker is somebody random. The most publicity we get on this is when somebody's following a lady at Target or Walmart. It's a very rare occurrence. It's going to be somebody you know. And we've done so much research that we're pretty sure it's between 1 and 3 people that you're close to, meaning it could be the coach, the parent, the brother, the neighbor, the best friend's father, the woman who is an empty nester and had some hardships in her life. There are male traffickers and female traffickers. There's male buyers and female buyers, male victims and female victims. So it doesn't really matter. It's what you've been exposed to. So I think people really need to see that. And then, one thing I teach in my trainings is what's the difference between a 12-year-old Halloween costume and a 13-year-old Halloween costume? About 6 inches. Because for whatever reason, now that we are in our teens and in our early 20s, we're a slutty nurse, we're a slutty this, we're a slutty
Right,
that. And
right.
we're okay with it, right? We're desensitizing our culture in America to make victims. And right now, America leads the demand. We buy the most sex because sex sells. And we're trying to say that this is a third world problem or, an issue in other countries when we are the leading culprit in the entire industry. I think people need to realize it's a lot closer to home than they want to admit.
So huge takeaways for me from that answer, kind of like we talked about in the first episode, is what you said just now. Nobody is, 5 years old, like one day I want to be a sex worker. That's my dream job. It is all about what you are exposed to and what
Correct.
media puts in your face. And I want to get into in just a moment the adult entertainment industry, but I also want to talk about just the media that we see, things that are approved for kids, things that come on YouTube Kids, as they get older. And so for reference, I have a 15-year-old, I have an 11-year-old, I have a 6-year-old and a 7-year-old. And so those age groups, I get to kind of get to see what is available to all of them on YouTube. But as soon as you go into the teen mode, you see exactly 6 inches shorter. The skirts are shorter. Girls are encouraged to be more sexual and sexy, and boys are encouraged to partake in that and enjoy it. And it's very, I mean, it's kind of disturbing. And like you said in the first episode, this all started with somebody hitting play on a video. And so
Hmm.
many people don't realize that, yes, I mean, kids have phones at school, but it's those moments when they're unsupervised, right? That they pull it out, and children are often exposed to porn for the first time by their peers. It's not like they just go and find it themselves. They are exposed to it. It's shown to them. And I've had this conversation a lot lately just with some mom friends and at sleepovers, right? That's one of the first places it happens. And it's just for me as a mother, one of my greatest cautions to people who are listening is, if there is not an adult present or a highly trusted adult present, media is almost off the table for me. I want my kids outside playing. I want you riding bikes. I don't want you all sitting around an iPad together, no matter the age. So that's a huge factor for me. But I did want to pivot here because we were kind of talking about this to the adult entertainment industry. And you said America is the number one consumer of this industry. And I don't think that people understand exactly how women, and I'm not sure exactly if this is true for men, how they get pulled into the adult entertainment industry. I recently watched a documentary on Netflix called Hot Girls Wanted. And the premise of this documentary is it followed different women, and I say women, but they're very young. They're, 18 years old. As soon as they turn 18, they see a Craigslist ad that says Hot Girls Wanted, right? And these girls are flown away from their families. Everything is provided to them. They're told, all you have to do is enjoy sex and be hot. And we will buy your plane ticket. We will provide housing. We will provide food, but you get to become a star. You get to make the
Hmm.
big bucks. Spoiler alert, they do not. The adult entertainment industry runs through these women in a course of 3 to 6 months. Most of the women are totally burnt out, totally ashamed, totally sad because they're put into a house with other porn stars and they're not allowed to have a life outside of that. They're not allowed to go anywhere outside of that. A male typically lives in the house with them or lives adjacent to the house and then provides work to them. He says, "You've been set up for this interview today." And it's not an interview, it's a scene they're going to go film. And what you find out through the course of the documentary is these women often end up totally burned out within 6 months. They've spent through their money because they actually had to pay rent, you know, and they actually had to
Right.
chip in towards that food. So do you think that Americans are aware of that? And what are some ways that we can spread that word other than just, I'll link the documentary in my show notes, but what are some other ways that people can kind of push that narrative?
Yeah. So I think it's important. And that documentary does display a really great, um, realistic version of how the recruiting happens because everything is done online now. Once upon a time, we were introduced to porn by a magazine hidden under a mattress. Now it's 3 clicks away.
Right.
And when we search anything, and I don't want to throw, certain apps or things under the bus, but if you don't take the proper protocols to make sure that your sites are secure, then you're just bringing more harm. I think, that recruitment of hot girls wanted, right? Everybody wants to be appreciated. Everybody wants likes. Everybody wants to be loved. Everybody wants attention. Everybody wants those things. Even if you say you don't, you do because you need it. We were born to connect.
I think that's like
So we were
Maslow's
created that way,
hierarchy of needs. It's like the
right?
bottom one, right? Like you want to be
Right.
appreciated.
Yes, you want to be noticed. And so when you can do it with what feels like minimal cost to you, minimal, work ethic, minimal anything, then it's instant gratification. And so if you have that as your ad out there, it's going to be easy for a young, naive person to say yes because it doesn't look like it's going to hurt you. And that's how recruiting and grooming happens. It's the devil's greatest tool. He's seductive, right? It's pleasurable, it sounds good, and then they flip the script. So the adult entertainment industry is making it sound like you could be a star, you can be a movie, actress, you can be a singer songwriter, you could be any of these things. That's how they get a lot of these young girls and boys into it.
Right, this is just
Modeling
your foot in the
agencies,
door.
right?
This is just your foot in the door.
Yeah.
You're going to go big places after this. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, we've got all those connections. You just got to show up.
Right.
And so they use that on purpose. And then they figure out what the people need, right? So a lot of traffickers use this ploy that they can fill this need, and they do it with no questions asked. You want a new skin on your video game? No questions asked. Here you go. You want a new phone? No questions asked. Here you go. Right? That builds this endorphin, this need for more. The dopamine that continues to be met gives them pleasure, and now you've got them hooked. Meanwhile, they're also doing this other thing. And much like in the adult entertainment industry, they say, all right, I filled your need. Now, what are you going to do for me? I've gone days, months, years filling your need. I've got you right where I want you. So, what are you going to do for me? And that's when that victim goes, oh, crap. I didn't think that that was going to happen. So, I better do it because I need to be grateful for what I've received. Right. And so, here we go. In the adult entertainment industry, the West side of the United States says, hey, we want to legalize sex because we know we can take care of our dancers, our ladies working in the clubs. We're going to give them access to female health care. We're going to make sure that their background screened and checked. We're going to make sure that these ladies are clean, have proper hygiene. We're going to get their nails done. We're going to get their hair done because this is modern day slavery. We just want to dress it up and make it pretty.
Mm.
So now we've got this very manicured dancer who is probably young, brain's probably not fully developed, right? Because once you hit 40, that sex appeal starts to diminish. So they got to be 20 something and they're vulnerable. So then we legalize it and we say, you're going to make your money, you're going to be taken care of. But here's what they don't do. The buyers who come in, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas,
Oh,
are coming for one night stands, right? They're coming for a bachelor party, a work convention. They're coming for a couple of days. And my question to the legal sex industry is to say this: are you also STD checking, background screening, anger management, uh, you know, checking if they're sexual predators? Are you doing that? No, because otherwise the money won't come.
right.
There'll be too many hoops to jump through. And so that's the problem. It doesn't matter how glorified you make the sex appeal. The problem is we don't have enough prevention mechanisms to safely provide safe sex in that industry. The other thing that I don't think anybody talks about is that when we they said, okay, well, we'll treat it like marijuana, right? We'll create this market where we can tax it, right? We can legalize it. Okay, well, if that's what we're going to do, how do you develop the worth of that person's body?
Right.
Because I'll tell you, it's not the body, it's the secret that you keep. That's how you price out the sex work. So if I'm a, congressional candidate or the president of the board of education or a lawyer or a doctor, and I don't want people to know that I'm buying sex because I have a family, a practice, prestige, right? I don't want people to know that I'm doing that. That's going to be more valuable of a hand job than if you were somebody homeless living off the street wanting the same service. It's the
Right.
secret you keep. I can charge $5,000 for the same sex act that I can charge $50 for, right?
Wow. Yeah.
So that's the misconception. How are you going to attack that? So you can't, is what
It's
I'm trying to tell you.
impossible.
There's
Yeah,
no
you can't put a
standard.
value on the secrecy of it, right? And it's
Right.
kind of going back to the adult entertainment industry. A lot of people will say, well, it's not trafficking. These girls signed up for it. They said yes to the ad. They said they wanted to go. But then what you don't realize is they're put in such a position, speaking of secrecy, they're put in such a position where their face is out there. Maybe the man's face is not out there. And the documentary specifically talks about the male porn stars longevity in the industry it's exponentially higher than a female's. Females are kind of burned through because, well, they're done, but they are put in a position where it's keep doing this because I can't go home. My face is out there.
Right.
I'm ashamed. I'm shamed now. I can't. And And they're really not, even within the homes where they're living with their roommates, they're not allowed freedoms until they're able to perform certain acts. They're not allowed freedoms until they go and do more degrading scenes. And it's just, I mean, it's a very eye-opening thing that it's not, there's not as much free will in it as one would think. And it's just I think it's a fantastic documentary. It kind of puts you off of anything you might think about in terms of that
Yeah,
industry.
and
It's not
again, going back to the PTSD of the people enduring the violence, they did not sign up for the violence,
right.
right? They signed up for the job. And if you were going to be treated the same way as an administrator, right, or a teacher, or, anything, any other industry, you wouldn't allow that crime to happen. Like, why are we teaching and putting laws into place, about sexual harassment in the workplace? Because people treat sex violently because we've been taught that that's okay,
Right.
you
Right.
know? And so that's why we can't legalize it. It doesn't make sense. It
Right.
doesn't make sense.
So, what can parents, educators, and communities do to identify and prevent human trafficking, as well as once it has been perpetrated, what are some ways that we can use trauma-informed language to help with this situation?
Sure. So not every state requires you to be a mandated reporter over the age of 18, but that would be a really great start is if everybody does it anyway. And a mandated reporter is if you witness or suspect abuse of a child or an adult, and you report it to their local hotline. Our hotline for human trafficking is 888-373-7888. And you can report it there if you think you see it. It might look like a couple of different scenarios. One, labor trafficking isn't talked about nearly enough, but it is probably one of the higher numbers of trafficking cases in America, but we don't know how to recognize it, so we don't report it. And what that could look like is anything from a massage parlor. I actually had a friend last night tell me, she's like, we as a counseling center just took a space in a shopping center, and there's a massage parlor next door. And the massage place looks like a normal boutique. But she said the weird thing was I only saw men coming and going, and we never saw the workers actually come to shift, meaning they probably live there in
Wow.
cots in the back, right? And I'll just be really transparent. I was like, I went to the spa the other day and there wasn't one guy in there.
Right.
So, no offense, males. We know you get massages, but no, you don't in mass quantities.
Right.
I don't think I've
All at the
ever seen
same
my husband go
place.
get a massage.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've never seen a man go get a massage, and my husband lives with me. So okay, so there's that. That's a huge sign. It might be in the nail salon where, ladies, if you're going to get your nails done, and whether the woman speaks English or not in America doesn't matter. It's a vibe, right? It's a feeling that you get. So if you're talking to your manicurist and she's not allowed to really answer, or you try to tip her and all of a sudden a manager comes out of nowhere and is sort of eyeballing you and watching you and then says, hey, we don't take individual tips, we collect tips here. That, in a restaurant makes a little bit of sense where they
Hmm.
all put their, like, the bartending tips get tipped out, the bussers get tipped out. But in a nail salon, no, that's not
Right.
normal.
Right.
So that, like that's an opportunity for you to identify. It might be in a retail store where the person who's working seems exhausted. You recognize them maybe from another space because a lot of Eastern European victims get brought over to our area in different parts where retail is high. So in beach town communities or wherever they're, high consumerism. So if there's an entertainment place like Disney World, right? Or anything like that, a cruise ship where it seems like they work a couple of different shifts. They never really seem to leave. You see them bartending one place, selling clothes in the next place, and a waitress the next place. Like, why are they working all the time? That's usually a sign of labor trafficking. It's not necessarily going to be just like they're Hispanic and they're roofers. That's a really big misconception. It doesn't mean that. It means that they're being held against their will. They're being deprived pay. They're probably living and working in the same place, and they're not being fed properly, and they might be drugged.
Right. Wow.
That's labor trafficking. So that's happening, right? Then you have the kids in school. Like myself, a lot of the flags were, why is she skipping school? How come there's a change of status? Why is she drinking? Why is she getting suspended? Why is she acting out? How come she's being bullied or bullying others? Why is her name written on the locker for a good time? Call this number. Like, those are questions that people can ask. And if we take our opportunity to be a mandated reporter, we suspect there's abuse happening, we take the opportunity to help save a life. And then you asked about trauma informed language. Let me wrap up with this. Never talk to the victim in a way that makes them think you feel bad for them. Oh, bless your heart. Oh,
Hmm.
you poor thing. Oh, this, oh, that. Because what you're saying is, I'm higher up than you. I have more authority than you. I am better than you. And what's happening to you, oh, it's a tragedy. No, I don't know that this is a bad thing necessarily happening to me. This might be my whole life. This might be my boyfriend, girlfriend. This might be my dad. I don't know that it's bad. So I need you to empower me. You're really brave. Thank you for being strong enough to say something, for answering my question, for sitting with me today. Thank you for just being vulnerable and transparent. Give them the courage, because if you don't, they're going to think that you're just part of the problem. And I will promise you that that trafficker has already coached them in what you're going to say. If it's anything like that, they're going to tell them, hey, they're going to say this. You don't listen to that, because I love you and I'll take care of you. I'm the one paying your bills. You make sure you answer to me, not them. They'll coach you on what the law enforcement will say. One thing that we're really big on is the question that says, well, what were you wearing when that
Ugh.
sexual assault happened to you?
Ugh.
Right? It's so demeaning and stigmatizing. Well, of course you were going to get that. Did you see what you were wearing last night? It does not matter what my clothes were. PJs, a uniform, right? Or a dress. It doesn't matter. It was the perpetrator's fault. We stigmatize. So we don't want to ask those questions. What we want to ask instead is, what were you feeling? How did you get there? What happened when you tried to leave or didn't leave? Right. So we want to ask kind of more feeling based questions versus connotations of it was their fault.
Well, and I do want to, for clarification, if you are listening and you're in the state of Florida, you are a mandated reporter if you're over the age of 18. So that is a thing in the state of Florida. Um, that means that if you see something, you are legally obligated to say something. With that being said, I will link that hotline in the show notes for today. And then my next question is, are there specific red flags people should watch for in their own neighborhoods, communities? And I hate to say it, but their families.
Yeah, we absolutely. I'll tell you a couple stories. One is, you're going to look for on red flags a place where people come and go often, but don't stay very long. So, like I was mentioning, that massage parlor, there's people coming and going. Those men were coming and going, but they never saw anybody that worked there. So, you never really see anybody that lives there, but yet people are always coming and going. That's a big deal. Noticing within our families, is there the favorite? When you talk to kids specifically, to find the person that's hurting them is not the person that they're usually afraid of, okay?
Wow.
Because they
Okay.
usually love that person. It's the person that spends the most time with them, buys them the most gifts, does lots of nice things for them. They're a favorite of all the other kids. That usually will tell you a better sign than the person that they're fearful of. You want to recognize those little things. In other situations, it could be like a complex. Whenever, especially, okay, this is kind of interesting, but whenever there's a new cell phone purchased for a child, it's hard to say that because we give them to our kids so early now. But how do they get two? Or, for instance, why do they have one and no parent bought them one? That's usually a pretty good indicator that there's somebody else perpetrating their life. So
Right,
we
right.
want to know that. You might also notice if there's people who randomly moved in and they don't really speak English, but there's somebody who does for them about everything. And I'm not talking about like the second generation daughter who grew up in America and has foreign parents. I'm talking about a third party, the cousin, the random, agent, and they do all the talking. You really want to make sure that you're watching those kind of things because it's always about control. So we want to recognize that. And then, the drugs are really important too, because this stuff, goes together. So drug trafficking and human trafficking pretty much go together. So if you have fentanyl in or around your house at some point in time, you can pretty much link it to there's human trafficking happening.
You've said fentanyl. Is that the only
No,
illicit substance or all illicit substances?
I would say pretty much all.
Okay.
But that one, for whatever reason, with young kids is really the bigger problem, because it's disguised. Fentanyl is disguised in a lot of different things. So it's put on marijuana, it's put in cocaine, it's put in alcohol. If they get it for whatever reason and they're selling it, it's being sold to your kid, you can pretty much guarantee that that person who's selling it is linked to some sort of human trafficking
Okay.
ring,
Wow.
because they go so hand in hand together. And then, like I said, that change of status within your family, that kid who goes from having nothing to being somebody, or opposite, from being somebody to having nothing. That's a really big indicator that status quo change, because now all of a sudden, they're being used or they're burnt out.
Right, right. Wow. Just like you were kind of saying, like you cut your hair, you started missing school, like these massive changes in your attendance or your performance, or whether it goes
Mm-hmm.
one way or the other, that's a big indicator.
Yep.
All right. And then last question for this episode. What advice would you give to someone who is currently recovering from being trafficked?
Woo, girl. There's so many different things. But I would say number one, as much as you feel like no one understands you, there's actually a whole community of people who can.
Mm,
And you're not going to find the right fit for your trauma healing until you're ready to admit you have trauma. Yes, it's called trafficking, even if it was your boyfriend, even if it was your parent or your sibling. If there is any type of force, fraud, or coercion, force, physical or verbal, fraud, somebody's lying, right? Or coercion, there was a master manipulator, a narcissist that was sort of controlling your every move, and you're over 18, it's pretty good indicator you've been trafficked. A lot of the self-identifying comes with working with another survivor. And we have a whole community of them all over the nation who are willing to help, have those conversations. And I would just say, don't give up on yourself. The nightmares will cease
mm.
and the triggers will calm, but you have to do the work, right, to make sure that you're starting to heal. So it's only when you're ready that you can actually heal. It won't just happen because of time pass.
Right. The saying time heals everything is I have found in my own journeys not necessarily true. If you're not striving for and looking for betterment of self or healing, time passing does very little.
Yeah, and we want to make sure that they know they're not alone. It's very isolating. It's not domestic violence, even though it can be part of your story. It's not just being homeless, even though it can be part of your story.
Right.
It's hard to go to any of those facilities or treatment centers if they're not trained in human trafficking. We can get offended as survivors and victims very quickly because the people don't know how to respond to us. Even though we have a lot of similarities to just simply, and I don't mean it lightly, but sexually assaulted, sexual harassed, domestic violence, we have those experiences, but there's also that third party indicator. Something happened to us that we can't really explain, in words. The survivor coming out of the life needs to have a multitude of what I call alternative therapeutic modalities. They have to have many different options to express themselves without just words, because the words aren't going to come yet. And they say that sexual violence is one of the highest levels of trauma, because a physical violence with like a black eye, a broken arm can heal, right? We
Mm,
have medicine for it, we have surgeries available. There is still going to be that emotional factor that needs to heal, but the sexual organs themselves are completely unique. They're made with a purpose. And so when somebody desecrates that, it is hard to redeem that. You feel different. You grow up thinking differently from that. It changes your perspectives on relationships and everything. So I just want to say that, like, you're not alone in that healing journey, but it can feel very isolating when you seek help.
Is there a hotline for people who are searching for help? Would that be the same as the abuse hotline that we mentioned earlier in the episode?
Actually, there is a really great organization called Rescue America, and you can go onto their website, it's at rescueamerica.org, or you can call the hotline, which is 833-599-3733. And they have access to programs all over the United States to help women who've been trafficked.
Specifically women or women and men?
Actually, women and men, and they do have some family options as well. So if you have children and you're trying to leave your trafficking situation, there are some programs available for that too.
All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us, Alicia. This has just been another fantastic week, and I look forward to speaking with you again next week about what you are doing and the resources you are providing to survivors.
Thank you, Michaela.
Thanks, y'all, for listening to this important discussion with Alicia Tappan. Her insights are a wake-up call for all of us to stay vigilant and proactive in preventing trafficking. In our final episode, we'll explore how Alicia has turned the evil that was done to her into good through her nonprofit, Survivor-Led Solutions, as well as exploring the vital role of survivors in the recovery and prevention process. If you have any comments or questions about today's episode, I'd love to hear from you. Reach out via email at shootin.the.breeze247@gmail.com or send me a DM on Instagram. My handle is at shootin_the_breeze_podcast. You can also share your thoughts by commenting on any platform where the podcast is available, including YouTube, Spotify, Prime Music, and Apple Podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode.